These oats have molasses on them. Lula likes them, the chickens like them, Jack Henry likes them. All of our agriculture right now and all our food is dependent on transportation, which is dependent on fossil fuels.
There's definitely risks in that.
100 years ago, everybody was self-sufficient. Everybody had their acres, everybody had a garden, everybody had a cow, everybody had some chickens. Now we lived in densely populated areas where everybody relies on things being shipped in, and that's changed the face of agriculture.
From a nutritional standpoint, you can't get better than local, organic food, seasonal. I mean, there you are. For me, that defines quality, and quality is what determines what I eat.
I believe it's better for the earth. I want to support people who aren't pouring chemicals on the earth. There's a lot more local, spontaneous organization that takes it out of the realm of corporate power and into the realm of people taking control of their own lives.
Just the growing want for farmers markets and the need for people to sort of be connected to their food source, even if they're not growing it. They want to go to the market to talk to the farmers, or they feel like a community, sort of a central place to meet, whereas, you know, in like towns used to have little squares and people would go and hang out, and now that sort of seems to be not the case. So people want a place where they can meet and talk to their community and just feel connected.
There's a vibration in this food, and when you eat it, it builds your structure. And it makes you think better, and it makes you feel better, and it makes you active, and it makes you want to, you know, just share. As far as farming, you know, if you're doing it for just pure selflessness, you're not seeking reward, I am not doing this because I'm going to make some huge monetary achievements in my life. But I'm doing it just because it's the right thing to do, and you know that everything works with you. Last week we only had beans and pickles, so we just came home and pickled them. I also walk around to my neighbors' houses and give them food, so, and everything comes back around, so. This is the future.
Helping to create a community which is bigger than ourselves, and yet it supports us from the ground up. I have steaming greens, I have onions, tons of cheeses, arugula, and a mixture of lettuces.
I have sprouts every week. I have sprouts. I have a mixed bean sprout. I have radish seed sprouts. They're a live food. They have enzymes in them. When you eat that little seed that's been sprouted, then you have the most energy rather than eating the big plant when it's big. But also when you sprout, then it creates more minerals and vitamins are available to the body.
Boy, about everything that you can grow in this climate. This year we grew 17 different kinds of tomatoes, and I don't know, 15 different kinds of winter squash, 4 or 5 different kinds of summer squash, probably 15 different kinds of lettuces. But I believe it was a German scientist that wanted to find out what the human body was composed of, so they burned one up, and he only found 3 things. It was nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. So that's what they decided to put in fertilizer. So when you buy it, you get nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. When in reality, the human body is composed of thousands of different things. Soil is extremely complex. And in other words, even per square inch, there's millions of microbes that feed our bodies. And when people use pesticides and herbicides, it has a tendency to kill those microbes in the soil. And then when they add the synthetic fertilizers are only adding 3 things, when in reality there's hundreds and thousands of things there should be in the soil. In a lot of commercial agriculture, the use for the soil is to hold the plants up straight. Okay? In our garden, it's very different than that. Our soil is very alive, so that's the reason. And we think that it's much healthier to live that way, and not so healthy to eat commercial food. And we think that a lot of the diseases and deterioration that people experience in their bodies is from the lack of nutrients.
I like the idea of it not being trucked in. And I like the idea of it being fresh picked. It's vital, yeah. Kids notice it too. They'll eat collards like this, but they wouldn't eat collards from the store, you know? They're not sweet.
It's just amazing how much interest there is in farm to school. That term, for some reason, catches everybody's attention. They look at it and say, well, of course, we've got to do that. It makes all the sense in the world. Let's just do it. And it's probably the one thing in a local food system that is the hardest thing to do, but people still gravitate to it. You have to change people's eating habits. You have to change people's attitudes in our society about cheap food. A $2 lunch at the school, salad bars are becoming much, much more popular at schools. Nobody thought that was the case, that would ever happen, okay? But even young kids, they're coming out with low salad bars because the first and second graders prefer salad in many cases. So a salad bar is a perfect opportunity for us to get some of our greens, sprouts, tomatoes in season, that sort of thing, for example. So there are certain areas that we're working on. We do pilots, we do salad bars, we do education. We'd have to make sure that the curriculum includes having education about local foods, not just our agribusiness system in this country that we say feeds the world, something much more local and real, and something they can get involved in. So field trips, farmers into the classroom, cooking classes in school with knives, it can be done, okay? And tastings, many of these students don't know what some of these whole vegetables are. They've seen them from a can or whatever. So some of the varieties of tomatoes, varieties of fruits.
With the word getting out that we are participating in Farm to School and trying to get those organic greens on our salad bars, we find that we run out of those greens now. The importance of supporting the Farm to School program is to get local sustainable foods into our environment for the children. If you can expose kids to products that they wouldn't normally receive other places, then they're more likely to introduce those into their regular life.
Make it however it's going to taste good to you. Good love, Sally.
Look at that blue one.
Now, if you would like to hold one,
I want to hold one.
Okay, Anna, will you show me with your hands how you're going to hold it, how we practiced yesterday?
Can I hold the white one?
Yeah, we just need to take turns.
We had them harvest some of the sunflower greens, and she ate them, and she's like, oh, this is so good. I just love these sunnies. And then later, her mom came to me at the farmer's market and said, what did you do? My child hates vegetables, but she's raving about these sunflower greens. So somehow I think just by having them have this direct relationship with the plants themselves, it creates that desire to enjoy the food.
I help get the soil out there and plant the seeds and stuff and water it. I like gardening. It's pretty fun. It's good for the heart.
Mine is the Swiss chard, and I've been selling that for the past 3 years, I think. I might start a little bit of a spinach crop, and then maybe I'm not quite sure what else to. I might start some potatoes or something. I don't know.
This is Millie. My name is Joni. Millie is a pet wild turkey. She's about 6 months old, and she's quite a girl. She just follows follows us all over and watches everything and checks everything out. I ordered my meat bird turkeys, and I got 5 wild baby turkeys with them. And I ended up, she's the survivor of the wild turkeys. What made her a pet is she was the only one that made it.
Millie laid 12 eggs, and they were not fertile, so I took those eggs out one very dark night and put in the baby turkey chicks. And those are domestic meat bird turkeys, and she thought they were just fine. She started singing, and she's just a great mom. She's doing real good with them, and they're growing good, and I don't worry about them at all. The other day, a hawk came over the ridge, and before that hawk hit the babies, Millie flew up and bumped into it in midair. And the hawk turned around, and I haven't seen him since.
I think they have a good life. I work hard to give them a good life. These guys weigh about 35 to 38 pounds. Whether you're raising them for meat or for just breeding stock or whatever, I think the happier any of these animals can be while you have them, the better your meat will be, the better the animals will grow.
Oh, this looks like a kiss to me.
Yeah, some kind of a special little reindeer. Huh.
I use this 101 proof wild turkey whiskey in order to calm the big birds down and just put them in a state of relaxing more. People often say, why don't you have a little bit of that too? But I have to know what I'm doing here. It's like everything on this planet. You've got many, many choices and many, many ways to do things. Gratitude is very powerful when you raise these animals and you put your energy into them and they return it. The turkeys to me are really special animal for me to raise because I do have the dairy goats that help me. They produce the milk and I make the yogurt. And the turkeys just love this yogurt. Energy is kind of just a vibration that comes from things. So I like to have happy animals. I like to create good spaces for them and give them lots of good food and try to give them the best I can. A farm really is everything. I mean, you have nurseries where the babies are born, then you raise the animals, and then when they get old, you take care of them, and then you help them die and you bury them. So the farm is a full cycle of life. Amel, you good girl.
These farming practices are truly ancient, and they are a connection and a bond that we have to our ancestors going back that long in time.
This garden is a waffle garden, and there's a lot of old pictures of this kind of garden in Hopi and Zuni and other places. And all it is a garden that's made up of a series of berms that are made in a grid fashion, so that the plants are planted in where the syrup goes in the waffle. So that's why I call them waffle garden. But they're really a very old style of Pueblo gardening.
thing that we have learned and that everybody can benefit from is that the things that are needed by all living things are always the same. Clean water and clean air and soil.
My parents always encouraged us kids to move away so that we would fully appreciate what we had growing up, and we all did. And the more time I spent away from Durango and from the ranch, the more I realized I had to get back. And a primary goal of my wife Becca and I was to be able to raise my kids and bring them up the way I was brought up. And the pigs that we raise here on the James Ranch, we market as whey good pork, okay? And that is because they are being fed the whey from the cheese making process. So they are a wonderful byproduct of trying to close this nutrient cycle, this nutrient loop that we've created by milking cows. The manure goes back on the pasture, the whey goes to the pigs, and then we have a beautiful pork product to sell. We also train them to electric fence so we can move them around in the pasture system and not have them be confined. Let them root, let them be pigs instead of being on concrete and slats their whole life.
The cumin, and I'd like a half a pound of that.
Okay.
And it's tough to decide between the young Belford and the mature Belford, but I think I'm going to go with the mature.
Cheese making is an amazing combination of artistic ability, your ability to adapt to the milk as the season progresses. With an unstandardized product, you have to change the make procedure as the milk changes throughout the year and as the cow's lactation changes. And in the big industry, you know, there's standardizing that goes on so that they're always starting with the same product, but from an artisan standpoint, constantly changing that. As far as the cheese making process goes, we bring the milk directly over from the cows, still warm. We mix it with the night before's milk and bring that up to temperature, okay? And we're not pasteurizing, we're using raw milk, so it's coming directly from the cow, so all of your enzymes and vitamins and lots of components that are critical for flavor development are intact. And that doesn't happen with a pasteurized product. The cheeses, when they're in the aging room, they're alive. I mean, we started with a living product, raw milk, and unlike pasteurizing, where you kill everything, you're starting with a dead product, and it's really, really difficult, if not impossible, to make a really good cheese from dead milk, and that's what pasteurizing does. It kills everything in the milk, the good and the bad. With small-scale cheese made with raw milk, the flavor is so intense it just requires less cheese. So Alice is a young cow, has yet to calve, and when she does calve, we will leave the calves on the cows, and again trying to emulate nature's system here. And leaving the calves on the cows enables them to be much more healthy and to have that bond and be a more productive cow when the time comes to milk them. The conventional system is that you pull the calf away immediately and the heifers are raised in small pens for future milk cows, and then the bull calves are put into oftentimes the veal industry. So the average lifespan in the conventional dairy herd, a productive life of a cow, is 2.5 years, and then their feet give out, their joints give out, their ligaments give out because they're being stressed so highly and that they're on concrete their entire life. And confinement originated because we had this glut of grain, and what were we going to do with all this grain after World War II but to confine animals, beef, and then dairy.
One of the things that's a real issue for me is killing these animals. It's a sad day when I drop them off at our little local packer to get them processed.
All our freezers packed full of beef, and it's healthy, and that's the taste and the flavor of the beef is so different. I was a vegetarian for 20 years until we started, and my husband too was. I
find some comfort in the fact that these animals, due to my my stewardship of them, have lived the best life that they could possibly live. They're taken care of well. And they're all going to die, as we all are all going to die someday. I just choose the day for them to die. And so they've led a complete life.
They were brought over on the boats with Christopher Columbus and got loose in Mexico and evolved as a wild animal. And these animals, like I said, they evolved in the wilds of northern Mexico and South Texas. The demand for beef was so great after the Civil War that the Texas Longhorns that were driven up the trail to Kansas and to the railheads because everyone was demanding beef. They were almost extinct. By 1920, there were only about 50 head left. And so they had to go back into Mexico to find some original bulls and then rebreed. And this is the only breed of cattle that is actually preserved by an act of Congress. The Longhorns calve very easily. And you walk out in your pasture in April, it's all green and it's like, oh look, there's another baby. Oh look, there's another baby. It's been an interesting business, and it certainly has taught me about the circle of life and how life and death balance each other, and death is part of life.
A lot of seed companies are buying from larger seed suppliers, and rather than starting from a small scale. So it's important, I think, that we're supporting small scale farmers and family farms by having them grow our seed.
The seeds that are in our country that are developed by hybridization and genetic modification and other engineering things such as what they call Terminator, and it's developing very specialized seeds for high production and high yield that ignores some of the things I was talking about with open pollinated local seeds. And as a result, they're vulnerable to many things that our local varieties are not. It's also a more controlled access to your food sources. We like to see local production versus food shipped from China, India, Taiwan, and who knows where, all over the world. The best seeds are the seeds that you grow yourself on the land where you're at, because each habitat, each area has its own climatic conditions.
When they genetically engineer those crops, they can get higher production. Bigger corporations, that's all they're interested in, and so they keep pushing for it and pushing for it. And people have just got to understand and be aware that if you want your food to be safe, you got to stay proactive and offer an incentive to the farmers that still want to do it the right way.
I planted these tulips last year by hand. There's about 1,000 of them, and I'm looking forward to every year them multiplying, so there'll be more blooms to pick. I paint a lot, and I design the gardens, or I decide on labels if I have a new kind of soap. I love the earth. I love to work with it. I love to watch the cycles. I think it is the most rewarding and heart-sustaining thing I can do. I grew up in Yosemite, and my mother did too, and my grandmother, and my mother used to go into the woods and collect seeds in her pockets and bring them home and plant them in our gardens. My farm work is something I feel can benefit lots of people by growing local food and selling it to them at the market, or letting people come and pick it themselves, understanding where their food comes from, getting a joy of the taste of good food, the smell of freshly picked flowers, the beauty of what surrounds the gardens, the trees, the grass, the woods. It's a wonderful place to be all day. In the spring, I plant seeds that I have gathered in the fall, some of them. I buy some also. And then in the summer, I start harvesting lettuces, the spinach, the things that we planted in the spring, and selling them at the market or to restaurants. The farm is finally sustaining me. I have been out of debt for about 5 years, so it's finally working, and I'm very grateful. The land is very generous.
Well, it's a nurturing thing to do, you know. I mean, it feels really good to be out here. And it's hard work, but it's rewarding, and I'd rather spend my energy growing food than in a gym on a Stairmaster. So I was an athlete, and it's very self-serving. It doesn't really serve it does serve the community in a way, but this is just where I'm at now. So I'm gonna stick with it.
I rotate my crops, so I have to take down the bean fence every year and move it so I can put something different in its place. I don't know much, but I think that I listen well to the plants and what they need. They seem to tell me. We didn't use much water this year because of the rain, but we have this drip system that's pumped from the spring, and we have it in sections, and we turn it on about every 2 days on a hot summer day, and for 2 hours in each section, and the drip hose soaks the soil very well. Like gardening, painting lets me leave my mind and just kind of go with the flow and the feel of some other part of me that isn't thinking. And that's when I do the best work, is when I'm not in my head.
So agriculture has by far the biggest impact on our streams and rivers, and one of the things we've been doing down here is trying to prevent that impact to our streams and rivers. And I have the water quality business, which looks at the macroinvertebrates in the river and how many bugs and all the types of bugs are good indicators or excellent indicators of how good and how healthy our streams and rivers are. I studied river systems for 20 years and the health of river ecosystems, and basically in basic biology. I really like that kind of balance between the human uses and the natural and the needs of the natural system as well, trying to just minimize our impact on these ecosystems here. But the dams are what make agriculture in this area possible. Otherwise you would have water through May. If you're lucky, you'd have water through the end of June.
I like to eat fish. I like to catch them once in a while, but since I started stocking fish in streams, it kind of took the buzz off of going out there and catching them. It's more fun to release them. The rivers do provide food for people. Our reservoirs have enough mercury contamination that it is a major problem in eating the fish. We live in western Colorado. The whole southwest of the United States has always been dependent upon runoff from snowfall and irrigation from that source. And now it's coming down to the point where we're going to be competing as farmers for the same water that the communities need for drinking and domestic use. And that's not a good thing. People say that there's a lot of water that farmers are wasting away, but it takes water to grow food, and I've never found anybody that doesn't like to eat food.
My grandfather was a builder, and he actually built a flour mill, a white flour mill. They couldn't keep enough wheat to keep the mill going, and so I had an uncle that decided, well, I'll go buy some land and start raising wheat to keep the mill going. So that's what he did. That milling operation stayed in existence until the late 50s. That's how we got started farming, is to try and raise enough wheat to keep the mill going. And so when the mill kind of, they had to shut that down, then we started farming. When I was a young boy in the early 60s, there were dozens and dozens of people out here. There were farmers on every 160, 320 acres. And so during the 70s, they started leaving. In a small operation like ours, our expenses are a lot higher because everything is hand done. We don't have the economies of scale like they would with large corporations, so our prices have to be higher. The difficult thing is it's kind of like the Walmart mentality, is bigger is better. And with most farm operations, especially farmers market type situations, we can't sell things for that kind of price because those things come from these huge operations where their costs are very low. Realistically, I could buy wheat for less than I can grow it for. So I can still run my milling operation purchasing wheat from other people and maybe even come out better than what I am right now. The actual share of a household's income that goes to food has actually gone down over the last 20 years, percentage-wise. In the 60s, people were spending about a third of their income on food. Today, I believe it's 9%.
Well, I started farming when I couldn't even reach the pedals of the tractor, I was like 8 years old when I first started driving tractor every day, and I've been doing it ever since. With the dryland farming, it's very natural farming. We don't fertilize, there's no additional water put on, very few chemicals. In fact, a big part of my operation is totally certified organic, where I use no inputs at all except natural. And it's about it. The crops we produce here are basically Mother Nature. So I need these crops to survive.
We really haven't produced good crops since, the mid to late 90s. The crops the last 10 years have been pretty poor. There's a lady I farm for over here that started farming here in the 50s, and they quit farming in the 90s. And they sold their wheat in the first year they farmed for the same dollar amount that they did the last year they farmed. And so wheat today is really not any different than it was in the 50s and 60s.
Well, if things don't turn around, it'll just get to be fewer and fewer, bigger and bigger companies controlling our food supply, just like they are the oil supplies now. There's very few oil companies left. You've seen what the oil prices have done. Eventually, I think that's what will happen with our food.
I don't see the future of farming is going to be that good if things don't change as far as what we're getting for our commodities. There's too many farmers going out, no young farmers coming in.
I made the decision when we opened here I was going to buy all the local I could. I try never to say no, because if my job is to provide the best quality to the customer, I can't beat the local farmers. Regional agriculture won't grow unless the big stores decide to buy local. If I depended on regional, I'd be out of business. I'd make it a liquor store.
I think the impact planetarily is immense when we're talking about corporate agriculture. And the more we can support and actually grow more local farmers so that we are eating, not only supporting our own community and our own economic viability, but supporting our health and the health of our children through organic foods and foods that are locally produced. We're not shipping them in and having, millions of miles between us and our food source. So I think that as a planet, we really need to be thinking about this carefully as far as learning how to make our communities more sustainable and to be looking less and less outside of ourselves for sustenance in many, many ways. So my focus on buying foods from as much as I can from local is to start creating an emphasis on sustainability in our community. I think it's important to do that because I think there's more and more reasons why it's going to be difficult to expect to be fed and supported from the outside world.
I think the best way to reach sustainability on a global level is to sort of start in your own community, your own neighborhoods, and supporting local farmers and having farmers in areas, as well as having people have small gardens in their farm, in their own backyards, and reducing the need to have food shipped from all over the country.
The key to sustainability is not profitability, but paying your bills and keeping it going. And in order to do that, we have to sell the product, and we do that all ourselves. And we have to have customers to sell it to. And this allows us to achieve the market that will allow us to be sustainable.
In 2002, we had this severe drought in this area, and we had no grass and no pastures. We had no irrigation water, and the cost of feed, just absolutely went through the roof. So we decided to do what you call destock, meaning we got rid of most of the livestock. And we had been doing some direct marketing of our lamb meats at the farmers market, but from 2002 onward, we decided that we would concentrate 100% on direct marketing. And so what that means is that every single lamb that we raise out here has a retail customer waiting for it. Cost-wise, we can't compete with the big packing companies, but we don't have the same product anyway.
It's a basic tenet of ecological principles that the more diversity you have, the more stable that ecosystem is.
It's a free system. All these systems are free. The solar-powered fountain. We have even solar-powered cooling fans, so the cooling fan brings in cool air. I mean, look at these little tomatoes. They're doing great. And this is December in Colorado with a tiny, tiny little heater. And it got down to 12 degrees below zero, and the dome was toasty warm. It was up 50 degrees. But this, you can grow 365 days a year. So I think it's the answer to growing in the Rocky Mountains.
Harvesting your own food, that's when you start developing respect for the land and the soil and the animals. And I think just working closely with the animals and closely with the soil and the vegetables, that's when you start earning respect for them and start living a more sustainable type of lifestyle based on ecological concepts.
Whoa! Wait till I get the gate down, girls. Well, they aren't gonna wait. But you can make it easily. Yeah, go for it. The sheep is just part of our farm, but it's an important part because it gives us the protein, the meat that we need. But it also produces, since they are in a pen during the winter time and they're fed hay, we take the manure and the straw and the leftover hay and compost it all together and put that into our gardens, mix it into our gardens along with our fruit trees. And so between the produce that we produce out of our garden, the meat that we get out of the sheep, and the fruit off of our trees and the nuts, we're able to pretty well sustain ourselves and sustain the land in a good fashion.
Large-scale farming, I think, is trying to keep it so that it's harder for farmers to grow food. There's different government subsidies that make it hard for people to kind of live as farmers and subsist on their own.
Locally raised food of any kind is more carefully handled and has a person's name on it. You know that the average product that's sold in the supermarket traveled a distance of 1,200 miles to get there? Now, And then you add up all those things, you add up the pesticides, the antibiotics, and all the things that necessarily need to be used in commercial operations of food growing of any kind. And then you add the fact that they've been stored and refrigerated or preserved to travel 1,200 miles and have a shelf life, then I think you're starting to add up an awful lot of things that may be detrimental to us.
We know that these old standard crops with no genetic engineering, we know they're safe because people have been eating them for centuries. The big outfits, you got to keep them from taking completely over where it turns into the place where you can't get away from chemicals in your food. They're very important. It should be very important to the American people.
I'd like to say we have the answers and we have all the experts and so forth, but we basically bring people together, putting people in contact with the right people that can either inspire them or instruct them or collaborate with them. But it's largely helping people learn from each other. And it's a long-term effort. It's going to take a while to go the other direction. No quick fixes.
In a way, as the market continues to grow, this, not to sound corny, but this could be a one-stop shop.
In the USA Today the other day, it had a number of farmers markets 5 years ago as compared to today. It's completely doubled, which is pretty remarkable. I think a lot of communities are building and local economies are growing due to people's need and to have a connection to their food source.
There's a large body of people out there that are claiming that locally produced foods can't feed the world. I think that equally there's a claim to be made that mega agriculture also cannot happen, and in the long run it's going to catch up with us, and we're just now starting to see some of the symptoms of it. There are small producers producing for large bodies of people. If we put half of the effort into that plan and that mentality, we're going to be a lot better off in the long run.
I think sustainability, it ties back into the local food, and if you are harvesting your own food, that's about as local as you can possibly get. Also, people want to know where their food comes from, and on a broader scale, let's say on a county-wide scale, having that connection and that respect for the earth is what's going to sustain us in the long run. Well, if you are involved with it, then you respect it. And if you respect it and you know what you're eating, you know that you're eating healthy stuff, you're eating tasty stuff, you know where it's comes from, and if you have respect for it, then you want to sustain it. I think there's a general philosophy that people want to be self-sufficient as much as they can, because if you're self-sufficient, then you're more secure. You aren't dependent on other people to provide your food or your housing or something like that, so you get a sense of security. And I think from that, a sense of satisfaction.
I mean, I believe that within the heart, within each one of us, we have something that directs us and helps us and guides us. And if we'll learn to listen to that, it's hard to do in the hubbub of the city. The noise and all the commotion and the smoke and everything else. Out here, it's easier to tune into that. And if we'll follow that, then it'll have an effect. Maybe better vegetables that taste better, because the heart's in it too. You learn to have an intuition that comes from the heart, where you connect with whatever you're working with, like you do in Finhorn, where they literally speak to the crops and ask them how to grow better. That's a little bit far out for some people, but there's no limit in the heart.
Yeah, whatever the mechanism is, anybody that's really interested in their crop, loves what they're doing, they're going to produce something that's better. And as far as food, that's more and more nutritious and better tasting. And it's all tied together.
You should be growing the soil, and the soil will grow the crops. That's a good definition of agricultural sustainability. That's where it's really at. It's got to come from the heart.